Hi, I'm Adeline. And if you've ever had someone you love look you dead in the eyes and then throw scalding soup at your face, you'll understand why I didn't scream, why I didn't cry, why I didn't say a word. I just left. See, it wasn't even my mom who asked for my car and my credit card. No, she told me to hand them over to her stepdaughter, to Vera. Give her all your things or get out, she said. So I got out. I left the house I helped pay off. I left the dinners I used to cook. The silence I thought meant peace. But when they came back home that evening, the house was empty, except for one man in a tailored suit waiting in the living room. Before we go deeper, drop a comment. What time is it where you're listening, and where from? I always wonder how far stories like mine travel, because this one might make you ask yourself how far you'd go before you finally say, enough. They say mornings reveal the mood of a house, that if you wake up feeling tight in the chest, it's because something already went wrong. That Tuesday, I woke before the sun finished rising. The light hadn't yet filled the kitchen, but I was already padding across the cool wooden floors in socks. The air smelled faintly of lemon oil and leftover garlic bread. I'd scrubbed the counters twice, not for cleanliness, but just to keep my hands moving. I cracked the window open, let in the morning chill of suburban Sacramento, and set the kettle on. I didn't touch the coffee machine. That was Evelyn's territory, always had been. As toast popped, I reminded myself that Vera was coming again, my mom's stepdaughter. She wasn't family by blood. My dad passed before she came into our lives, but you'd never know it from how Evelyn treated her. The praise, the fussing, the our girl tone in her voice. I tried not to let it get to me, but the past few months it had started to dig. Still, I made breakfast, oatmeal, toast, and the leftover soup Evelyn liked. I wasn't trying to impress. I just didn't want to trigger another one of her storms. Evelyn came down around 9 a.m., her housecoat dragging behind her, glasses perched low, no good morning. She just sat, spooned oatmeal into her bowl, and sipped loudly. I waited. The silence dragged. She was winding herself up. Finally, she looked up, eyes too bright behind her lenses. "Vera's stopping by around 10, she said sweetly, the kind of sweet that's laced with poison. She's been having such a hard time lately." I nodded once, neutral, just enough to pass as listening. "She'll need your car today, and your card, just until she finds her footing at work." My spoon froze midair. "I'm sorry?" "You don't use the car during the week. You work from home now, and the card, it's time you did something useful. She's family too, you know." I swallowed hard. Not oatmeal. Anger. "No," I said calmly. "I'm not giving her my car, or my card. I've helped enough." Evelyn's face hardened. "You think you're better than her with your little online job and your notebooks? This is about family. She's trying. You're hoarding." I held steady. "I'm not hoarding. I'm surviving. And I've given this family more than you care to remember." She stood. "She'll be here soon," she said sharply. "Give her all your things or get out." That's when I knew. It wasn't a request. It was an ultimatum. I didn't say anything, just reached over and turned off the stove. Then came the scraping sound, the soup pot. I turned, too late. The soup arced through the air like some lava-hot tidal wave. It hit my cheek, soaked my blouse, seared into my shoulder. But the heat wasn't what stung. What stung was the clarity. She threw it, at me. Her daughter wasn't even there yet, and Evelyn had already chosen her, violently. I didn't flinch. I didn't scream. I just stood there, soup dripping from my collar, staring at the woman who gave birth to me, now looking at me like I was trespassing in the house I'd helped pay off. I remembered the day she had the deed changed over last year. "Simplifying the paperwork," she said. I hadn't argued. I thought, stupidly, that peace was worth it. Apparently, peace meant surrender. I walked upstairs, still dripping, still silent. In my room, I took the small overnight bag and packed only what was mine. Jeans, 2 sweaters, my laptop. Then I opened the bottom drawer. There, under old birthday cards, was the cloth napkin my father embroidered when I turned 15. "I see you." His handwriting, his stitching. I folded it carefully and placed it at the very top of the bag. No note, no goodbye, no begging. Downstairs, I heard the garage door creak open. Vera's SUV pulled in with poetic cruelty. I didn't wait to hear her syrupy voice ask, "Oh no, what happened here?" I walked past the kitchen. Evelyn didn't follow. Maybe she thought I'd come back. Maybe she thought guilt would hook me again like it always had. I reached the front door. Soup clung to my shirt, but my back was straight. I held my car key tight and stepped onto the porch. The wind had picked up. It felt clean. I opened the car door, sat down, turned the ignition, and I didn't look back. I didn't call anyone. I didn't have a plan. I just drove. Through intersections I usually rolled through like second nature, but today nothing looked familiar. The silence in the car was thick. Even the engine felt like it was holding its breath. My hands were locked at 10 and 2, like I was a teenager taking her first road test. Was it the soup drying on my chest, or her words still ringing? Give her all your things or get out. No trembling, no tears, just a blankness settling deep in my gut. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't go back. An hour later, I pulled into the parking lot of a strip mall cafe, one of those places with burnt coffee, weak Wi-Fi, and no one who cared if you sat too long. I didn't go in. I sat in the car, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The soup had dried in a stiff line down my neck. My skin blotchy, not from tears, but from shock. How did I end up a stranger in my own life? The last time I felt this lost was just 4 weeks ago. It was a Thursday. I was working at the family grocery store, restocking shelves in the canned goods aisle, something I'd done hundreds of times before. It was my routine, my place, the quiet rhythm of work that had steadied me after my father passed. And then I heard it. The sound of heels clicking too fast down the main aisle, loud, exaggerated laughter following close behind. Vera. Her voice carried like someone used to being overheard, like someone who wanted to make sure everyone knew she'd arrived. I glanced over. She was wearing a blouse far too white for a grocery store and heels that screamed more fashion blog than food manager. And right behind her, Evelyn, smiling with the pride of a mother escorting her daughter to prom. "Everyone, meet our new store manager, Vera Campbell," Evelyn announced, like she was at a red carpet event instead of standing next to a crate of dented tomato cans. No one looked at me, not even Vera. She just flashed that rehearsed, tight-lipped smile and walked right into the back office like she'd been there for years. I waited. I waited for Evelyn to say something, anything. A look, a nod, a shred of decency. Instead, she walked over, patted my shoulder gently, and whispered, "Take some time off, sweetie. You've been running yourself thin. Let Vera handle things now." I wasn't fired. I wasn't even demoted. I was erased. Back in the cafe parking lot, I pulled my phone from the center console. My hands were cold. Not from the air, but from the memory. I opened the family Facebook group. New notification. Campbell Legacy, Women of Strength album, uploaded by Evelyn. I tapped. Photo after photo. Vera smiling in the break room. Vera organizing canned goods. Vera leading morning huddles in the same staff circle I used to build. And then, there it was. A photo of the Thanksgiving display I had designed the year before. Cornucopia, twinkle lights, a warm autumn palette. Every detail mine. The caption read, "Vera's first fall installation. Brilliant work." I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered above it, trembling. I scrolled again. Then I saw it. A picture from a recent family dinner, our dining room, my serving bowls, the menu I had designed, down to the wine pairing. Caption, "Beautiful evening, hosted by Vera for the whole family. Her warmth brings us together." My name wasn't even mentioned. It felt like someone had cracked open my chest and rearranged the truth without asking. I wasn't even in the photo, and yet it was all mine. I set the phone down, let the screen fade to black. I didn't even realize where I was driving until the sign came into view. Campbell Market, since 1973. My father opened that store with a single freezer and a dream. After his stroke, I stepped in. I rebranded it, grew it, nurtured it. Now, across the windows, a banner stretched wide and bold. Founded by Evelyn and Vera Campbell. I parked across the lot. I didn't go in. I just sat there, staring at the place that had once been the heart of my world. Through the window, I could see a teenage cashier folding paper bags. A few regulars I used to know strolled through the aisles. I knew every corner of that store, every flicker in the lights, every squeaky spot on the floor. My father once told me, not long before he passed, "Keep the ledger, Addie. One day it'll mean more than you think." I had. The original paper ledger, his handwriting, early sales, handwritten inventory, every check he signed before Evelyn even knew the store existed. Now, his name wasn't even on the building. Later that night, I pulled into a gas station lot. I stared at the dark sky and made a decision. I sent a message to Clara, my old coworker, the only one who'd ever said what I was too scared to admit. Me. I think it's time, she replied almost instantly. I always knew they were pushing you out. I saved something for you. Come by. That was it, but it was enough. I typed her address into the GPS, just 15 minutes away. I turned the key and let the road take me forward. As I slowed at a red light, something shifted in the trunk. Just a small slide, one corner of something peeking from under the napkin. I see you, it whispered again. I smiled, not with happiness, but with certainty. Let's see how much of history they think they've rewritten. When Clara opened her front door, she didn't say much, just looked at me with eyes full of something heavier than sympathy. She handed me a manila envelope. I didn't know who else to trust with this, she said. I've had it for a while. Her home smelled like lemon and cedar, clean, grounded. I hadn't realized how much I missed that kind of peace. I opened the envelope right there in her hallway. Inside was a copy of a legal document I'd never seen before. It had my name printed at the bottom, followed by a signature that was supposed to be mine. Asset Consolidation Transfer Agreement. According to this paper, I had signed over my entire stake in the grocery store, to Evelyn. The date? A month before Vera waltzed in with her fake smile and clipboard. That's not my signature, I whispered. My voice felt too small for the room. Clara nodded. I figured. I saw Vera hand it to Evelyn. Some notary guy was there, but he didn't ask for ID or anything. Just stamped it. The heat in my chest spread like wildfire. I wasn't just ignored. I was erased. On paper. In ink. With stamps. Legally invisible. I couldn't breathe right for a few seconds. Then Clara placed her hand on my arm. I still have the key to your storage unit. I kept it, just in case. I didn't ask questions, I just nodded. We left 10 minutes later. The ride was silent except for the wind outside and the pounding inside my chest. The unit was in the industrial part of town. Gray, boxy buildings. Dusty keypad. The air smelled metallic. Clara unlocked it. I stepped inside. And there it was, the crate I'd packed after Dad died. We dragged it out. Near the bottom, the ledger. Leather-bound. Worn from years of use. Page after page, my handwriting, my numbers, my signatures. And at the very bottom, between old recipe books, a torn envelope. My name, written in my father's hand. I opened it slowly. The paper fragile, but still strong enough to carry the words that followed. If anything ever feels wrong, go to Mr. Thatcher. He helped me protect what matters most. I left instructions. He knows where everything is. Trust him, Adeline. My hands shook, not from fear, but from clarity. He knew. He'd known they'd come for me. He'd left a trail, and I was finally ready to follow it. We didn't talk much after that. Clara helped me pack the ledger, the letter, and the envelope into a cloth tote bag. No ceremony, no goodbyes, just purpose. We got back in the car and drove straight downtown. Clara had looked up the address from the letter. Mr. Thatcher still practiced law in a modest brick building wedged between a dental clinic and a notary public. The irony of that didn't escape me. We parked in silence. I gripped the tote like it held my spine. We walked in together, but I asked to speak to him alone once we reached the front desk. The receptionist nodded and disappeared behind a wooden door. A moment later, it swung open. He stepped out, a tall man in his 70s, silver hair swept neatly back, a trimmed suit that said old money, and eyes sharp enough to slice paper. "You're Adeline," he said, not asked, said. "I've been wondering when you'd come." He led me to a simple office, leather chairs, oak shelves, a faint smell of aging books. Then he opened a locked drawer in the credenza and pulled out a thin black folder. My father's initials were embossed in gold. He set it on the desk between us, opened it slowly, carefully. Inside were copies of the original ownership documents for Campbell Market, dated, notarized, all predating Evelyn's arrival. Then he flipped the page. There it was, a letter notarized, my father's signature clear. My daughter, Adeline Campbell, retains majority control of Campbell Market. If ownership is ever disputed, refer to the primary ledger in her possession. Her signature alone carries final authority. I didn't blink. Mr. Thatcher leaned back, hands folded. "You ready to assert your rights?" he asked. I took a breath, a long one. Let it stretch all the way through me. Then I pulled the cloth napkin from my coat pocket, the one Dad embroidered years ago. I set it down next to the folder. Its edges were frayed, soft, but the stitching held firm. I looked him square in the eye. "Yes," I said, "but I'm not just coming for the store." He tilted his head, intrigued. "I'm coming for every lie they told, every piece they tried to steal, every version of the truth they rewrote without me." He nodded once, then tapped the forged transfer agreement. Good, he said, because whoever forged this is about to regret touching ink. I left his office feeling steadier than I had in months. Outside, the sky was bright but not warm. My phone buzzed, one name on the screen. Laya. I hadn't spoken to her since she left the store 2 years ago. A quiet, nervous girl, always double-checking Vera's emails before hitting send. The kind of person who noticed everything but said nothing. I messaged her. Hi, it's Adeline. Something's come up. Can we talk? She replied before I even set the phone down. I thought this day might come. 2 mornings later, I parked outside the Sacramento Public Library. I had a folder of documents to print, things Mr. Thatcher needed for what came next. I wasn't just filing paperwork. I was preparing to take back the truth. The printer room was quiet. Fluorescent light hummed overhead. I logged into my old email, scrolled to a folder labeled Resumes, the last one I'd updated when I was still hopeful about joining a nonprofit board or consulting. As I hit print, a Google alert popped up at the top of my screen. I clicked it. It opened to a county filing. A grant proposal submitted a week earlier. My heart slowed. At the top of the document was my resume, my formatting, my language, even my phrasing when describing the outreach program I launched after Dad's stroke. Only the name at the top? Vera Campbell. I stood frozen, one hand still resting on the printer lid. They hadn't just stolen credit. They'd stolen my identity. This wasn't personal betrayal anymore. This was state fraud. The librarian cleared her throat gently behind me. I blinked, stepped back. The machine spat out my resume. I folded it slowly, put it in my folder, walked to the car like I was moving underwater. By noon, I was sitting across from Leia in a small cafe tucked in a quiet Curtis Park corner. She looked older, more confident, but her eyes still held that nervous flicker. The kind of look people wear when they've been waiting for someone to say, "You're not crazy." I saved some of the emails, she said quietly after we ordered. I didn't mean to spy or anything. Vera always made me feel like I was doing something wrong, even when I was just typing what she told me. I nodded. You don't need to explain. I know what that pressure feels like. She slid her phone across the table. Dozens of screenshots. Subject lines. Draft for Odalyn. Delete after. Rewrite. My name in every corner. Some were attachments I remembered writing. My phrasing, my style, my notes. You knew they were using these? I asked. Laya shrugged. I thought it was approved. Evelyn kept saying things like, we need to clean up Adeline's legacy, make it more future-facing. I leaned back slowly. Legacy. They were ghosting me, using my work while pretending I never existed. Would you be willing to forward them? I asked. I already have, she said. I sent them to a backup email. You can use them however you need. That afternoon, after I dropped Laya off and thanked her, I went straight back to Mr. Thatcher. I handed him everything, screenshots, resume, the grant application. He flipped through it carefully. This is damning, he muttered. We needed a trigger. This is it. He stood, moved to the back office. A private conference room. Plain, windowless, but charged. He'd scheduled a sit-down with a retired judge, a neutral party still licensed to mediate disputes. This wasn't a lawsuit, not yet, but it was the shot across the bow. The mediator had a calm, firm voice. He went over the evidence quietly. Vera's resume, the emails, the forged transfer, my father's notarized clause. I sat silently, let the documents speak. No tears, no anger, just paper, just truth. At the end of the meeting, Mr. Thatcher began drafting our next move. Not a lawsuit, a formal packet, an itemized summary of everything we had, addressed to Evelyn and Vera's shared home. The tone? Professional. The message? Crystal clear. You have 24 hours to respond before we escalate to court. Before I left, I added something extra. A yellow sticky note. Square, neat. For your records and your conscience. That night, as the sun melted behind the Sacramento skyline, I sat on the edge of my motel bed. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was short. You don't want to do this. You know how this family handles disobedience. I stared at it, then deleted it. They were still speaking the old language. Disobedience. Like I was some unruly child stepping out of line. But they didn't realize I wasn't the quiet one anymore. And the next message? The one they didn't expect? It was already scheduled. Sent not just to Vera, but to the state funding board she had lied to. Because when you try to threaten someone who's already walked through fire, they don't flinch. They get strategic. By the time I stepped out of Mr. Thatcher's office that night, the sun had dipped below the buildings, leaving only the long blue hush of dusk. I didn't go back to the motel. I didn't go anywhere familiar. I drove. I drove until the lights on the highway blurred into one another and the silence in my car became a kind of shelter. Then, Friday afternoon, Evelyn called. Her name on my screen lit up like a match. I didn't answer. But she left a voicemail. "You've made your point," she said, her voice syrupy smooth, but with an edge, like a knife wrapped in velvet. "Enough already. Come to the house, alone." I deleted the message. 30 minutes later, a text from Vera. "If you think this makes you look strong, you're delusional." I stared at it. Typed slowly. "I'm not trying to look strong. I just stopped playing weak. Send." The rest of the day passed in a kind of eerie stillness, until Mr. Thatcher called in the early evening. "They've requested a private negotiation," he said. "No lawyers on their side. Just the two of them. I think they're scared, Adeline." I stood at the window of my motel room, the reflection of my face faint against the darkening sky. "Good," I said, my voice calm, cold, certain. I tapped the glass once with my fingertip. "Let's make them sign." The following Thursday, I stood in front of a frosted glass door. At Thatcher and Lowell, LLP, Mediation Suite. The hallway smelled like bergamot and money. I wore a black blouse, no makeup, my father's old wristwatch ticking steadily on my wrist like a metronome of resolve. I didn't knock, just opened the door and walked in. Evelyn and Vera were already seated. Flanking them, a young man in an ill-fitting suit, fumbling with a yellow legal pad. He looked like he'd borrowed both his confidence and his haircut from a YouTube tutorial. Mr. Thatcher stood when I entered, gave me a subtle nod, like a conductor waiting for the soloist. The mediator began. "Thank you all for being here. This is a confidential settlement session. All parties have agreed to keep discussions private unless stated otherwise. Let's begin." Vera's young lawyer cleared his throat and launched into their proposal. A modest profit-sharing agreement, contingent on my silence. I would have to withdraw all public statements, remove my name from anything related to the store, and agree not to make future claims of ownership. There was no mention of wrongdoing, no apology, and of course, a non-disparagement clause. Evelyn leaned back like she'd just gifted me the last piece of bread at a royal banquet. Her eyes dared me to react. I didn't. I simply opened the slim leather folder I'd brought and slid it across the table toward the mediator. He handed it over without a word. Inside, a full set of notarized amendments to my father's will, 3 months before his stroke. Vera's hand paused in midair, just above a water bottle. Her smile wavered. The attorney blinked rapidly. "We weren't aware." Mr. Thatcher leaned forward, cool as glass. "The original will was updated. This version includes a clause granting exclusive rights of ownership, branding, and derivative property of Campbell Market and its affiliates to Ms. Adeline Campbell, provided she remained active in the business." He flipped the page. "These supporting documents," he continued, "show consistent tax filings, vendor contracts, payroll logs, all under her name." Then came the pause. "And neither Evelyn nor Vera submitted any filings in that period." Vera's hand tightened around her pen. Mr. Thatcher went on. "Which means Ms. Vera's use of that branding in public grant applications, community sponsorships, and social media constitutes a clear violation of intellectual property law." The silence in that room felt like gravity. Evelyn spoke first, bitter, sharp. "You manipulated your father. He was weak. He didn't know what he was signing." I turned to her slowly. "Is that how you justify it all, Evelyn? That people are always too weak or too stupid to challenge you?" She opened her mouth again, but I reached into my bag and pulled out one final piece. An envelope, torn at the corner, my father's handwriting across the front. I handed it to the mediator, who read it silently, then passed it on. It was short. "To my daughter, thank you for protecting the heart of what we built. I trust you to do what's right, no matter who stands in your way." Evelyn paled. Vera looked like someone had unplugged her. I sat straighter. "My terms are simple," I said, voice steady. "You will sign over full control of the business, the storefront, the name, the branding, all of it. You will retract your claims, publicly and in writing, and you will not contact me again, not for birthdays, not for funerals, not for second chances." The young lawyer sputtered. "Perhaps we could—" Mr. Thatcher raised one hand. "If not," I added, "we move forward with civil litigation, criminal fraud charges, and a press release to every outlet in the Tri-County area." The young man blinked, then nodded. Vera reached for her water and knocked it over. I didn't flinch. 30 minutes later, they signed. I took the final copy in hand, then added one final line in blue ink under my name. The gift you demanded was never yours to begin with. I stood. I didn't look back. Because this wasn't revenge. It was release. 3 months later, I no longer woke up to tension, but to sunlight. My new apartment was modest. 2 rooms. A kitchen barely big enough for 2 people, but it was mine. No ticking clocks behind me, no footsteps down the hall, no voices deciding what counted as home. Just me, a chipped coffee grinder from a yard sale, and peace. That morning, I poured coffee into a ceramic mug I'd bought myself. Plain, white. No more floral porcelain, proper cups Evelyn insisted I use. I hadn't taken anything from the house. Not even memories. Later that day, I was scheduled to speak at a small event at the public library. Nothing formal, just a local gathering of women, some estranged, some rebuilding, all survivors. They'd asked me to share my story. Not all of it, just enough. On my way out the door, keys in hand, I spotted a box on the welcome mat. No note, just cardboard and tape. I brought it inside, opened it gently. Inside, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was the ceramic soup bowl. The one Evelyn had thrown. Polished, clean, almost reverently packed. I held it for a moment, then set it on my bookshelf between 2 travel journals I hadn't opened in years. Not out of sentiment, not out of bitterness. Just acknowledgement. A relic, not a wound. That afternoon, standing in the library's main hall, I didn't read from any prepared notes. I didn't need to. I looked out at the group of women, some in business casual, some in jeans and cardigans, all of them quiet, waiting. There was a stillness to the air, like the kind that comes right before a rainstorm. Not ominous, just honest. I'm not here to expose anyone, I said. This isn't about blame. My voice didn't shake. I let the words settle between us. This is about what it means to lose your place in a family and still find your footing again. Heads nodded, slow and cautious, like people testing the floor beneath them. I'm not going to name names. I don't need to. What I will say is this. Sometimes the people who say they love you will chip away at you so slowly, so skillfully, that you won't even realize how hollow you've become until you're echoing. A woman near the back wiped her cheek with the side of her hand. I went on. I used to think silence meant peace, that if I just didn't push back, if I stayed agreeable, if I kept smiling, then eventually I'd earn my place. I paused. But silence doesn't equal peace. It equals permission. And when you keep pretending you're okay, just to keep the room from burning, all it does is leave you standing in the ashes, alone. A murmur ran through the room, some sighs, some whispered affirmations. One woman turned to the person beside her and whispered, "That was my story too." Afterward, a few people came up to me, hands pressed to mine, eyes glossy, but grateful. One asked for Mr. Thatcher's name. Another simply said, "You helped me leave." I gave them both my email. Later that night, I sat down at the little thrifted desk I'd refinished myself, $40 and some sandpaper. I opened my laptop, the screen glowing softly in the dark room. A blank post window waited in front of me. I stared at it a long time. Then I typed, "Forgiveness is not owed, silence is not consent, and sometimes love is simply letting go before it destroys you." I didn't tag anyone. I didn't name the store. I didn't link to the documents, the betrayal, the pain. I just posted it. By morning, the comments had begun pouring in. Not from strangers, but from survivors. One read, "You helped me leave." Another, "I thought I was the only one." That day, while grabbing paper towels from the grocery store, I'd chosen one across town, I turned a corner into aisle 3. And there she was, Evelyn, standing in front of the frozen vegetables like they might open up and offer her some answer. She looked older, not beaten, not broken, just tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from years of wearing armor that never fit. She turned and caught my eye. Neither of us spoke. She didn't look through me, though. She looked at me. Not with malice. Not with regret. Just recognition. Quiet. Heavy. I nodded, barely. She blinked once. Then turned back to the peas. That was it. Some wars don't end with battles. They end with nothing but breath. A ceasefire of truth. That night, I lit a single candle in my apartment and sat down again at my desk. On my screen was a blank Word doc, titled simply, "And Chapter 1, The Day I Said No." The cursor blinked, waiting for me. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't writing to prove anything. I was writing because the story I'd been waiting to tell had finally begun. not when they handed me power, but when I realized I'd always had it. Because peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of clarity. And clarity is a kind of freedom no one else can grant you. Not your family, not your mother, not the woman who tried to replace you. Only you. That afternoon, standing in the main hall of the Sacramento Public Library, I didn't bring notes. I didn't need them. It was a small event, maybe 24 women in folding chairs, the kind of gathering you might walk past without noticing. But inside, the air was thick with something unspoken, a quiet tension, the kind that comes not from drama, but from people who've learned to carry too much for too long. I stepped onto the low platform and looked around. No microphone, no podium, just me. I'm not here to expose anyone, I began. My voice was steady. This isn't a revenge story. The room stilled. Eyes met mine. This is a story about what it feels like to be erased, and what happens when you decide to exist again, on your own terms. No gasps, no applause, just the kind of silence that listens. I used to think being quiet was the price of love, I said, that if I didn't argue, if I stayed agreeable, if I kept giving, eventually they'd see me. Eventually, I'd belong. I looked down at my hands, still, calm. But silence isn't peace, it's invisibility. And pretending to be okay so everyone else can stay comfortable, that's not strength, that's survival. A woman in the second row wiped her eyes. Another leaned forward, like her spine couldn't help but straighten. I was never kicked out, I continued. I was overwritten, slowly, skillfully. And the worst part, I almost believed I deserved it. A soft hum of agreement moved through the room. People nodding, breathing, remembering. I didn't lose everything in one day. I gave it up piece by piece, thinking I was buying harmony. Turns out I was just buying time before the fall. Near the back, someone whispered, "That's exactly what happened to me." After the talk, a few women approached. One held my hand a little too tightly and said, "You just described my entire marriage." Another asked if she could have the name of my lawyer. I gave them both my email, told them I'd listen if they ever needed it. That night, I went home to my little apartment. 2 rooms, mismatched furniture, the lingering scent of lemon oil from the cleaner I liked. I sat at my desk, the one I'd refinished myself, and opened my laptop. A blank post window stared back at me. I didn't rush. I just typed. Forgiveness is not an obligation. Silence is not the same as peace. And sometimes, real love is leaving before it breaks you. No names, no details, no drama. Just truth. I hit post. By the time I finished washing my dinner plate, the responses had already begun. Not from trolls, not from strangers. From survivors. One said, "This made me get out of bed today." Another, "You gave me permission to stop apologizing." The next morning, while picking up paper towels at a grocery store across town, I turned the corner into aisle 3 and stopped. Evelyn. She was standing in front of the frozen vegetables, staring at a bag of peas like she didn't know what came next. She looked older, not defeated, not broken, just used up, like someone who'd finally run out of people to pretend for. She turned and saw me. We didn't speak, but she didn't look through me either. She looked at me, not with hate, not with apology, just recognition. That was all. I gave her the smallest nod. She blinked, turned back to the freezer, and that was the end of it. Some wars don't end with victory or surrender. Some just end when both sides put down the story they've been clinging to. That night, I lit a candle in my living room, sat at the desk again. The Word document was still open on my screen. The day I said no. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel proud. I just felt free, because the story I'd spent my whole life waiting for permission to tell, it had already begun. The moment I stopped waiting for someone else to hand me the pen. Monday morning came with the kind of heaviness that makes it feel like you never really slept. The light outside was pale and overcast. I slipped on a jacket, grabbed my keys, and headed out to the cafe around the corner. Nothing fancy, just a place with decent coffee and familiar silence. At the register, I pulled out my debit card. Declined. I laughed quietly, more out of disbelief than humor, and handed the barista my backup. Declined again. I stepped aside, phone in hand, blinking at 3 new bank alerts. 3 identical messages. Fraud claim initiated. Account frozen. Pending investigation. It was the shared account, my main one, the one I had set up years ago, long before things fell apart. I called the bank immediately. The voice on the other end was polite but clipped. Yes, ma'am. We received a fraud report filed by Evelyn Campbell. She claimed unauthorized use of joint funds. She's listed as cosigner. I'm the primary, I said. Yes, but until the claim is resolved, the funds are restricted. Restricted? Like I was the one who had committed fraud. I ended the call and sat in my car, staring at the dashboard, jaw clenched so tightly my temples throbbed. My fingers wrapped around the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. 10 minutes later, I was back in Mr. Thatcher's office. They froze my money, I said, holding out the printouts from my banking app. He didn't ask for details. He just gestured for me to sit and pulled out his legal pad. They're trying to suffocate you, he muttered, scanning the documents. They won't, I replied. I'll learn to breathe elsewhere. By the time I left, he'd already filed an emergency injunction and drafted a formal rebuttal, complete with supporting records of my legal ownership and rights to the funds. But the day wasn't done with me yet. Around noon, I was walking back to my car after dropping off some documentation at the credit union when Clara called. I picked up immediately. Adeline, I'm so sorry, she said, voice low and urgent. The police came to my mom's house this morning. I stopped mid-step. What? They said Evelyn filed a report. She told them you broke into the house, that you stole from her, and that you threatened Vera. I felt my pulse climb into my throat. Before I could respond, another call came in. Unknown number. I switched over. Hello, Ms. Campbell, a man said, professional and flat. This is Officer Reed with the Sacramento Police Department. We'd appreciate it if you came in voluntarily to discuss a report filed by Evelyn Campbell. You are not under arrest. We just have some questions. What time? Today, if possible. I hung up without saying more, then sat in my car again, gripping the steering wheel like it might anchor me to the moment. It was becoming familiar, this breathless quiet before another blow landed. By 3 p.m., I was sitting in a windowless interview room at the police precinct. Beige walls, a metal table, a couple of chairs. It smelled like floor cleaner and faintly like fear. Mr. Thatcher sat beside me, calm and unreadable. A young officer entered, folder in hand. He looked tired or maybe just bored. He started with pleasantries, then slid into vague phrasing. There's been an allegation of property interference, he said, suggestions of aggressive behavior. Mr. Thatcher didn't flinch. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a thick folder, and slid it across the table. These are digital timestamps, email trails, financial ledgers, and verified location data showing Ms. Adeline Campbell has not stepped foot in her mother's residence since the evening of April 9th. He flipped to a page marked with a paperclip. Additionally, here are notarized documents indicating she was unlawfully removed from joint business ownership and that her vehicle was transferred via forged authorization. The officer started to leaf through the file. I watched his face change as the weight of the evidence began to settle in. We'll be reviewing this thoroughly, he mumbled. I'm sure you will, Mr. Thatcher replied evenly, and I assume any malicious filing of a false report will also be reviewed thoroughly. No one said much after that. By the time we stepped back out into the hallway, dusk had begun to stretch long and purple across the sky. That's when we saw them. The elevator doors slid open and out walked Vera. Right behind her, Evelyn. She froze when she saw us standing there. I didn't. Our eyes met. You wanted me erased, I said softly. Now I've become indelible. Vera narrowed her eyes. You'll regret dragging this family through the mud. Mr. Thatcher raised one brow. You should have considered that before forging 3 signatures. Or maybe that slipped your mind while shopping for your new Lexus. They didn't respond. But I saw something then, just a flicker in Evelyn's expression. Doubt. It was faint, brief, but it was there. That night I sat alone in my apartment. 2-bedroom walk-up, old floors that creaked in the same places every time. Thin blinds that fluttered in the wind when I cracked the window open. I wasn't thinking about victory. I wasn't thinking about pain. I was thinking about how long it takes to become someone no one can erase. My phone buzzed. A message from the bank. Fraud claim invalidated. Access restored. Attached to the message was a screenshot from the DMV system. The car Vera had received as a gift, now flagged as under legal review. I stared at the screen for a long time, then leaned back in my chair and whispered to the empty room. We're not done. Because people like Evelyn and Vera, they don't just try to take what's yours. They try to rewrite the whole story. But what they didn't understand, I still had the pen. After everything, the frozen accounts, the false police report, the forged car title, you'd think I would have gotten used to the rhythm of their games, the setups, the traps, the way they always struck just after I found a moment of peace. But the message that came that Friday? It was different. There was no caller ID, no email header, no voice on the line. Just an envelope slipped under my apartment door. Plain white, no return address. My name typed on a sticker. Inside, a single sheet of printer paper with one line of text. You might want to show up at tonight's HOA meeting. 6:30 p.m., Room B, Folsom Civic Hall. No explanation, no threat, no signature. But I knew. Whoever sent it knew exactly what they were doing. By 6:10, I was parked outside Folsom Civic Hall. The sky had streaks of gold and rose, early spring dusk that made everything feel slightly unreal. The air had that cool bite that seeps under your collarbones. I didn't rush. I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't even button my coat. I just walked in, quiet and unnoticed, and took the last seat in the back of Room B. Up front, Vera was already mid-presentation. She stood under a bright projector beam in a crisp pale blue blazer, her hair pinned into the kind of bun that says, I mean business, but also, I'm relatable. Her voice was chipper, too smooth, sliding from phrase to phrase like someone used to TED Talks and pageants. Community restoration, neighborhood pride, foundational partnerships. Behind her, a PowerPoint slide filled the screen, the title in bold. And Beautification Fund, proposed sponsors and partners. And then one bullet point caught my eye. Campbell Heritage Market, primary donor and founding business partner. I felt something cold bloom in my chest. Some of the people in the room nodded along. Others squinted. A few older neighbors I recognized from childhood sat near the front, listening closely. Vera's hands moved like a conductor's as she wrapped up her pitch. She smiled wide. Any questions? I raised my hand, slowly, intentionally. The room turned toward me. Vera froze. Yes, she said, tight, controlled. I stood. Could you clarify, I asked, when exactly you joined the Campbell family business? The silence crackled. Because, I continued, I happen to have tax filings from 2017 to 2022 listing me as the sole manager and contributor to Campbell Market. I'd be happy to provide copies. There was an audible gasp. Not dramatic, just real. Vera's face didn't fall, but it stiffened, like her skin didn't know how to adjust fast enough. She's just bitter, she said quickly, because she walked away. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked calmly to the front of the room, placed a single manila folder on the table next to the mic, and said, These are publicly filed records. Anyone interested in the truth is welcome to take a look. Then I walked out. No rebuttal, no defense. Because sometimes the loudest statement is silence, when it's backed by undeniable evidence. That night, back in my apartment, I logged into the old Facebook account I hadn't touched since my father's funeral. My profile picture was still 10 years out of date. I didn't update it. I didn't say a word. I just uploaded one image, a scanned copy of a portion of my father's handwritten will, his slanted cursive, my name, clear, the clause that confirmed my inheritance, my authority. I added a caption. Legacy isn't something you inherit, it's something you build. I posted it. Within 30 minutes, the comments started rolling in. Old employees, former customers, childhood neighbors, people who remembered me at the register, people who remembered the remodel after the fire, people who remembered me before Vera ever stepped foot inside that store. By midnight, screenshots were already circulating. Someone had pulled Vera's Instagram reel from the week before, where she'd claimed to be the co-founder and youngest expansion manager of Campbell Heritage Market. They placed it side by side with archive footage from a 2019 news segment. Me, cutting the ribbon at the grand reopening, wearing my apron, smiling through exhaustion. The contrast said it all. By sunrise Saturday, 2 local sponsors had pulled their logos from Vera's social media bio. The neighborhood Facebook group had quietly removed her as admin. Her scheduled talk at the Folsom Women's Entrepreneur Breakfast? Canceled. I didn't gloat. I didn't log back in. I poured myself coffee, sat near the window, let the warmth of the mug steady me. Then the phone rang. Javelin. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail anyway. You've made your point, she said. Enough already. Come to the house, alone. Delete. 30 minutes later, a text from Vera. If you think this makes you look strong, you're delusional. I stared at the screen. Then typed slowly. I'm not trying to look strong. I just stopped playing weak. Send. The rest of the day was quiet. Until just after 6 when Mr. Thatcher called. They've requested a private negotiation, he said. No legal counsel on their end this time, just the 2 of them. I think they're scared. I stood at the window again, watching the streetlights blink on. Good, I said softly. My reflection in the glass held still. I tapped one finger gently against the pane. Let's make them sign. The following Thursday, I stood in front of a glass door etched with gold lettering. Thatcher and Lowell, LLP, Mediation Suite. The hallway smelled like clean linen and expensive cologne. Everything polished, deliberate, restrained. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't excited. I was ready. I wore a black blouse, no makeup, no jewelry, just the old leather wristwatch my father gave me the Christmas before his stroke. The band was worn thin, the face scratched, but it still ticked. I didn't knock, just pushed the door open and walked in. Evelyn and Vera were already seated. They looked smaller than I remembered. Vera wore one of her tailored blazers, but the fit was stiff, unnatural. Evelyn, for once, wasn't holding court. Her hands were folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. Beside them sat a young man in an ill-fitting suit, clutching a legal pad like it might float him if the room turned to water. He didn't meet my eyes. Mr. Thatcher was already standing at the far end of the table. He gave me a nod. Quiet. Reassuring. The mediator, a man in his 60s with a calm voice and a courtroom poker face, began. This is a confidential settlement session. All parties have agreed to mediate in good faith. Nothing stated here will be publicly disclosed unless otherwise agreed upon. Let's proceed. Vera's young attorney cleared his throat and began reading. A typed proposal. It offered a modest share of business profits. Conditional, of course. I'd be required to remove all social media posts, make no future claims of ownership, and sign a non-disparagement agreement. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no apology. They were willing to give me a sliver of my legacy, if I agreed to pretend it had never been mine in the first place. Evelyn leaned back in her chair like she'd just fed the poor. Her eyes flicked toward me, sharp and expectant. I didn't say a word. I simply reached into my bag, pulled out a slim black folder, and slid it across the table to the mediator. He opened it, glanced at the contents, then passed it to their side. Vera reached for it. Her hand hesitated in midair. Her fingers twitched. Inside, notarized amendments to my father's will, dated 3 months before his stroke. Mr. Thatcher leaned in, voice smooth and deliberate. This version of the will clearly states that Ms. Adeline Campbell retains exclusive ownership and control of Campbell Market and all affiliated branding, provided she remains active in the business, which she did for over 7 consecutive years. He turned the page. Additionally, we've included tax filings, supplier contracts, and employee payroll records, all under Adeline's name, all predating Ms. Vera's involvement. Meanwhile, neither Evelyn nor Vera filed any documentation of business activity in that period. The silence hit like a bell. Then Mr. Thatcher added, almost too casually, and as such, Ms. Vera's use of Campbell Market branding in sponsorship proposals, community presentations, and grant applications constitutes clear and actionable intellectual property infringement. The air thinned. Evelyn's mouth parted slightly, like she was trying to form a rebuttal, but the words hadn't made it past her pride yet. Finally, she spoke. You manipulated him, she said, her voice flat. He was sick. He didn't know what he was signing. I looked straight at her. Is that how you've survived all these years, Evelyn? By convincing yourself everyone around you was too weak or too naive to challenge you? Her mouth opened again, but I reached into my bag one more time. This time I pulled out a torn envelope, yellowed slightly. My father's handwriting across the front. The mediator opened it, read the note inside silently, then handed it over to their side. It was short. To my daughter, thank you for protecting the heart of what we built. I trust you to do what's right, no matter who stands in your way. Vera's hands curled inward on the table, her knuckles pale, her mouth set in a thin, hard line. I sat up straighter. My terms are non-negotiable, I said. You will sign over full control of the business, including name, storefront, and all affiliated branding. You will retract your public claims in writing, and you will not contact me again. Not for birthdays, not for holidays, not for forgiveness. Evelyn's attorney opened his mouth, but Mr. Thatcher raised a single hand. If you refuse, I said, we proceed with a civil suit for fraud, theft, defamation, and identity misrepresentation. We already have media outlets requesting interviews. The public won't be kind. The young lawyer's hands were shaking now. Vera knocked over her water glass, reaching for her pen. I didn't flinch. 30 minutes later, they signed. The agreement, the retraction, The transfer of all business rights. I took the final signed copy and, without a smile, added one last line in blue ink under my signature. The gift you demanded was never yours to begin with. I stood. I didn't look back. Because this wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. This was a quiet return to truth. 3 months later, I didn't wake to shouting or silence. I woke to sunlight, soft and warm, filtering through sheer curtains I picked out myself. My apartment was still small, 2 rooms, a tiny kitchen that could barely fit 2 people, but it was mine. There was no ticking grandfather clock behind me, no footsteps pacing the hallway, no one judging the groceries I brought home or the way I folded towels. Just me, a chipped coffee grinder I'd found at a yard sale, a thrifted tea kettle, and the scent of dark roast filling the air like a quiet kind of triumph. I poured myself a mug of coffee, not the porcelain floral cup Evelyn used to insist on, because it's proper. This mug was simple, ceramic, and gray, unapologetic. That morning, I was scheduled to speak again, this time at a local women's event at the downtown library. Nothing big, just a few folding chairs in a meeting room with donated snacks, hand-lettered name tags, and women in all stages of rebuilding. The theme was financial independence after estrangement. They'd asked me to tell my story. I agreed, but I knew I wouldn't tell all of it, just the parts that mattered. I was almost out the door, keys in hand, when I noticed something sitting on the welcome mat outside. A box. Plain, no return address. I bent down slowly, picked it up. It was light, sealed carefully. I brought it inside, set it on the counter, and peeled the tape back with steady hands. Inside, a single ceramic soup bowl, the same one Evelyn had thrown at me that morning. It had been scrubbed clean, wrapped in white tissue paper, the glaze still cracked along one edge, but it gleamed, like someone had washed it more than once, like someone wanted me to know they hadn't broken it. I stood there for a long moment. Then I carried it across the room and placed it gently on a shelf between 2 travel journals I hadn't opened in years. Not as a wound, not as a message, just a relic. That chapter was closed. That afternoon, I stood at the front of the library's main room. No microphone, just my voice and a group of women who'd dragged their chairs into a circle. I didn't use notes. I looked at each of them, their tired eyes, their guarded smiles, their quiet bravery. I'm not here to talk about revenge, I said. This isn't about getting even. I took a breath. It's about remembering where you begin and where other people end. It's about not shrinking for the comfort of those who benefit from your silence. A few women nodded. One covered her mouth with her hand. I used to think I had to be small to be safe, to be loved. But it turns out the people who truly love you won't ask you to disappear. A pause. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is leave before the version of you they're trying to hold on to destroys who you really are. In the back, someone whispered, "That was my story too." Afterward, a woman came up to me and pressed a folded napkin into my hand. No name, just a note that said, "Thank you for showing me it's okay to start over." Another asked for my lawyer's name. I gave her Thatcher's card and told her he was a quiet storm. That night, I sat back at my desk, the one I'd sanded and stained myself. I opened my laptop. On the screen, a blinking cursor. A document titled, "The Day I Said No." I stared at it, not with fear, not with bitterness, but with something new. Stillness. Strength. Then I typed, "You can survive a betrayal and still write your way forward." I didn't post it, not yet. I just let it sit there, a truth waiting for the right reader. 2 days later, while picking up cleaning supplies at a store across town, I turned the corner near aisle 4 and saw her, Evelyn. She stood in front of the frozen peas again, staring at them like she didn't know what came next. She looked older, not broken, not defeated, just lost. She turned her head and saw me, and for the first time in my entire life, she didn't look through me. She looked at me. Not with hate, not with shame, not with regret, just recognition. We didn't speak. But that moment, quiet and still, was louder than any apology. I gave her the smallest nod. She blinked, turned back to the peas. And that was the end of it. Some wars don't end with treaties. Some don't end with closure. Some just end when you stop fighting. That night, I lit a candle, sat down at my desk, opened a blank document, and I wrote, "Sometimes you don't need to reclaim what they stole. Sometimes it's enough to reclaim yourself." Because the story I'd waited my whole life to tell didn't begin with rage. It began with the moment I stopped asking for permission. It began with me.